Hello guys, welcome back. Another day where we're going to be talking about the NHL playoff race and predicting which teams will make it in. Now the NHL playoff race is as tight as ever before, and with 2 weeks left in this NHL season, which teams will I predict to make it into the playoffs? Watch till the end to find out. Now, the NHL playoffs are right around the corner. Starting on April 10th, we'll get into the Stanley Cup playoffs action, but we have 2 weeks left until that, and 2 weeks left for a lot of teams to decide where they'll stand in the standings, and of course, which teams will make it and which teams will not. And right now, it's a close race in both the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. And the playoff races in both the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference when it comes to the wildcard races are super interesting, especially in the Western Conference where you've got quite a bit of teams fighting for those last two wildcard spots. Teams like Dallas, Colorado, Minnesota, Chicago, Arizona, they're all fighting for those last two spots. There's going to be a brawl to the last couple of weeks. And in the Eastern Conference, it's a little bit less packed, but those three teams fighting for it are super strong. Montreal, Carolina, and Columbus. But both conferences are pretty tight right now, and those wildcard races are always fun to watch when it comes to the last weeks of the NHL season, and this season is no different at all. Now, the team that I predict to finish number 4 in the wildcard race in the Eastern Conference is the Philadelphia Flyers. I see them finishing with 83 points, as do the Florida Panthers, but Philadelphia does have 6 games left. They do have some games in hand. They aren't officially eliminated as of now, but they are very close. I don't see them making the playoffs, obviously. I don't see them having a great last 6 games. They have a couple of opponents that I think will beat them down to a pulp, so I'm not too confident in the Philadelphia Flyers, but they've had a decent season up to this point, and you never know with Carter Hart. Now here is where it gets tense for the Eastern Conference. The last 3 spots between the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Montreal Canadiens. These 3 teams will be battling it out for those last 2 wildcard spots, and one team unfortunately has to get eliminated from that playoff race. And for the team that I think will finish 3rd in the wildcard race, the best team to miss the playoffs this year, I think will be the Montreal Canadiens. I think they'll finish with 93 points, be a very solid team, and it'll be a very successful team and a very successful season, but I just don't see them making the playoffs over a team like Columbus or the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, a big reason why I think they'll ultimately miss the playoffs is their last 5 games. It's a brutal schedule for the Montreal Canadiens, and their last 4 opponents are absolutely lethal. Now, they first played the Columbus Blue Jackets, which they can win, but they also can. I would say it's about 50-50 right now. Then they play the Winnipeg Jets in Winnipeg, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they play the Washington Capitals in Washington, and last but not least, they rounded out with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's not exactly an easy schedule. If the Montreal Canadiens want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to win against some tough opponents, which they have done in the past, but this is crunch time for the Montreal Canadiens. Even though right now I think they are sitting in that wildcard 2 position, I think that strength of schedule for them right now, having so many great opponents that they're going to have to face, will be ultimately their demise and a strength for the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the team that I predict to get the wildcard 2 position in the Eastern Conference is the Columbus Blue Jackets. I expect them to finish out with 97 points in the season, have a very strong last few games, and some of that has to do with their scheduling. They have a lot more easier opponents than the Montreal Canadiens, but I feel like right now the Columbus Blue Jackets will finally start to get themselves and finally start to wake up, because they haven't been playing the greatest in the last couple of weeks, especially with some of their acquisitions that haven't been playing the greatest. So I feel like they'll finally start to wake up, and the last few games, I think we finally will start to see them get rolling. When it comes to Columbus Blue Jackets, their scheduling is a big reason why I think they will do well. Now, they do face the Montreal Canadiens as well. I think they actually will win that game. Then they face the Nashville Predators, which will be a tough opponent either way. They face the Buffalo Sabres, which, how they're playing right now, should be a win for Columbus. They play the Boston Bruins, which might give them a win. They play the New York Rangers, which will probably be a win. And then they finish off the season with the Ottawa Senators in Ottawa, which will likely be a win, hopefully, for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And that's a pretty 50-50 schedule. You got some decent teams like Nashville, Boston, obviously, but you got some teams that you can beat, like the New York Rangers, the Buffalo Sabres, and the Ottawa Senators. So I feel like they will be able to get it done, at least have a 500 record in these next few games, and I think they will do well enough to make the playoffs. Now, I have a little bit of personal bias because I really want to see Columbus do well, mostly because of the moves that they ended up making, getting guys like Matt Duchene and Ryan Dzingel. Those were bold moves that not a lot of NHL GMs make in the NHL today. And if the Columbus Blue Jackets miss the playoffs, that can mean that the NHL draft will be a lot more boring. The NHL trade deadline can be a lot more boring. This time was a little bit of an exception because GMs went out there and got guys like Matt Duchene this trade deadline. So I want to see that kind of stuff continue. And in order for that to happen, the Columbus Blue Jackets need to make the playoffs this year. And even if they might get bopped versus Tampa in the first round, I still want to see them actually make the playoffs and actually see them rewarded for the bold moves they made. Now, the team that I predict to get the first wildcard position is the Carolina Hurricanes. I expect them to finish with 100 points on the NHL season. And again, kind of like Columbus, it has a lot to do with their strength of schedule, and they have a pretty solid one. While they do face some good opponents, I feel like they will beat some pretty easy opponents, and the Carolina Hurricanes, hopefully, will make the NHL playoffs this year. When it comes to the Carolina Hurricanes schedule, they first play the Washington Capitals again. They might get a point or two from them. Then they play the Philadelphia Flyers, which should be a win. They then play the Pittsburgh Penguins, which will probably result in a regulation loss. They then play the Toronto Maple Leafs, which you never know of them right now. Then they play the New Jersey Devils, which should be a win. And then they close out the season versus the Philadelphia Flyers, which should likely be another win as well. And with the Carolina Hurricanes, they now have 91 points. I predict them to get 9 points in the rest of the season. And I feel like that is pretty possible for them. They have slumped a little bit in the last couple weeks, but they have got some clutch wins versus teams like the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm hoping the Carolina Hurricanes do clutch it out because, oh my gosh, I want to see that storm surge in the NHL playoffs. Now moving on over to the Western Conference, and unfortunately for the team that I predict to finish 5th in the wildcard race, I have the Minnesota Wild. I predict them to finish with 82 points, and for the Minnesota Wild, it's not like they have the worst schedule in the world, but I think they've just given up on this season, and rightfully so. They've gotten some young pieces at the trade deadline, but they're starting to finally slow down. They're starting to play like a really, really tired team, and while they still are in the playoff race technically, I really don't see them getting much done in the last few games. Now, going on to the team that I predict to finish 4th in the wildcard race, I have the Chicago Blackhawks. I see them finishing at an 82 points, same as the Minnesota Wild. And the Chicago Blackhawks have put up a solid fight, but I think their fight is over at this point. The Chicago Blackhawks have basically ruined their tank. They started out amazingly, then they just dropped like a rock, and then they kind of came up just a little bit. But at this point, I don't see the Chicago Blackhawks making it. They did have a couple of games in hand that they lost to Arizona, so it is kind of topsy-turvy season for the Chicago Blackhawks, but I see it kind of failing in failure, where they don't make the playoffs, but they also don't have a great draft position. When it comes to the Blackhawks schedule, it is a little bit hard, I would say, on their end. Now, they first face the San Jose Sharks, which the Sharks have lost 6 straight games, but the Sharks will also want some blood, and they'll also want that win, of course. Then they face the LA Kings, which should be a win for the Blackhawks. They then face the Winnipeg Jets, which will be a hard task for them. They then face the St. Louis Blues, which is a big rivalry matchup that the Blackhawks might end up winning. And then they face the Dallas Stars, which, as a Dallas Stars fan, Blackhawks might end up winning, who knows. And then last but not least, the last game of their season, and end up facing the Nashville Predators on the 6th of April, which will be a huge game. And for the Blackhawks, that schedule is not easy at all. And the Blackhawks are kind of in a position where they have to almost win every single game at this point to make the playoffs, but that schedule ain't giving them any favors. Now we're down to the last 3 teams in the Western Conference, the Colorado Avalanche, the Dallas Stars, and the Arizona Coyotes, and I've gone back and forth with these 3 teams because I think these are going to be the top 3 teams at the end of the day in the Western Conference wildcard race, but I was going back on Dallas maybe missing the playoffs, Colorado missing the playoffs, the Arizona Coyotes missing the playoffs. It's really topsy-turvy and it almost changes every single day, but right now I do have my answer. And for the team that I think will just miss the playoffs, the best team in the Western Conference to miss the playoffs, I have the Colorado Avalanche. I see them finishing with an 86-point record. Not bad for them whatsoever. But for the Colorado Avalanche, I just see them missing the playoffs. It'll come down to the last couple of days, just like it did last year, where they did make the playoffs. But this year, I think it will be a different story. Almost going down, I think they went down 9 points if they do end up getting 86 points. But Colorado has a decent schedule, but I just don't see them doing too well, even though the goaltending has stepped up quite a bit. Now, the Avalanche have 6 games remaining in their current schedule. There are some winnable games in those 6 games, though. They first play the Vegas Golden Knights, which we'll see if they actually win in that. That'll probably be 50-50. They then play the Arizona Coyotes, which will be a huge game and a lot of implications for that wildcard race in the Western Conference. Then they play the St. Louis Blues, which will be a tough opponent for them. They then play the Edmonton Oilers, which should be a win on their part. The key word there being should. Then they place the Winnipeg Jets, which will be a tough game also. And then last but not least, their last game of the season, they play the San Jose Sharks, which will likely determine whether they make the playoffs or not. And the San Jose Sharks are a pretty good team that will likely beat them in the end. Now we're down to the last two teams, the Dallas Stars and Arizona Coyotes, and for the team that I think will finish in the Wildcard 2 position in the Western Conference, I have the Arizona Coyotes. I see them finishing with an 89-point record, solid amount of points for them, and a pretty low marker for a playoff team, but I feel like the Arizona Coyotes will get it done, and they will make the playoffs for the first time in what seems like forever. Now, for the Arizona Coyotes, their next game is against the Colorado Avalanche. Again, a big game if they want to actually make the wild card. That'll determine a lot for that wildcard race, and if they do win it, I actually do see them almost confirmed to make the playoffs. And after that, they face the Minnesota Wild, which I do see the Arizona Coyotes winning. Then they face the LA Kings, which will be a big game, but I do see the Coyotes actually winning that one too. Then they face the Vegas Golden Knights, which will be a tough game for them, but I can see the Arizona Coyotes getting at least a point from that. And then for the last game, they played Winnipeg Jets, which will obviously be a big game for them and a hard one, but I wouldn't put it past them to maybe actually win that game, especially if they want to actually clinch the playoffs in that last game. Now, if you guys did not watch channel back, I would say in September, I ended up making predictions for every single team in the NHL, all divisions, and how they would place. And for the Arizona Coyotes, I made a bold prediction, and I would say that they would make the NHL playoffs, being the Wildcard 2 team and being the worst team in the NHL to make the playoffs, but I predicted that they would make it. And the Arizona Coyotes right now are tied for that second wildcard spot. And while they had that 5-game losing streak, they did get that big win versus Chicago Blackhawks, and in my opinion, I feel like the Arizona Coyotes will get there, just barely, but I feel they will make the playoffs. But the Coyotes being in this playoff race is super exciting. I'm not really a Coyotes fan, but I am rooting for their success before the eventual move to Houston. So I'm excited to see them hopefully make the playoffs, hopefully win some games down the stretch, and here's hoping that the Arizona Coyotes are finally clutch enough to make the playoffs, which we haven't seen for a long time. Now, for the team that I think will finish in the first wildcard position, I have the Dallas Stars. I see them finishing with 94 points on the NHL season. I see them winning quite a few games at the end stretch of the season. And for my first favorite team, the Dallas Stars, I'll hopefully finally see some playoff hockey. Now, when it comes to the Dallas Stars schedule, they first play the Calgary Flames, which I think they can get at least a point out of them. And then they play the Edmonton Oilers, which should, again, keyword, should be a win. And then they play the Vancouver Canucks, which, once again, should be a win. And then they play the Philadelphia Flyers, which will likely be a win. I feel like the Philadelphia Flyers probably won't give up too much of a fight. And then they play the Chicago Blackhawks, which hopefully we see them win that game, a crucial game. And the last game of the season, which could have a lot of playoff implications if the Wild continue to maybe play well the last stretch. They played the Minnesota Wild in that last game on April 6th, and it'll be a huge game, but they got some huge games versus some bad opponents, and the Dallas Stars, their best team they're playing is the Calgary Flames, and then after that, they don't really have any playoff teams they're playing, so they'll have some easier opponents, and they have a little bit of a good schedule at the end of the season, which does benefit them quite a lot, and hopefully we see them not choke it, and actually play well against some bad opponents. Now, as a Dallas Stars fan, I was kind of hesitant to put them in this position because I'm going to be honest, I've seen them blow some worse leads and choke in even worse positions. But for the Dallas Stars, I feel like this year is the year that they'll finally make the NHL playoffs after 2 years of missing it. I was worried at some points this would be the third straight year in a row where they would miss the playoffs, but they have gotten some clutch wins against some good opponents, and for the Dallas Stars, these last few games are super crucial for them. While they have gotten a little bit of a chokehold on that first wildcard position, they are by no means clinched into the NHL playoffs. So if they go on a little bit of a slide, they lose some games, it could be all over for them. So I'm by no means saying that they are clinched to the NHL playoffs, but I'm hoping that they actually get it done, and I think they actually will. But again, this NHL playoff race is not disappointing whatsoever. There's a ton of teams in both the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference fighting for playoff positions. In the last couple of weeks, we'll see a lot of big games, some big opponents playing for some big positions, and there's going to be a lot of battles till the end, and a lot of great games to go with just 2 weeks left. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about this NHL playoff race? What do you think about the positions in both the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference? And of course, the big questions, which teams out of the West and the East do you think will clinch the NHL playoffs? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video about Connor McDavid and if you should ask for a trade. But that will be it for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on the NHL playoff race, which teams will clinch, and which teams you think will get eliminated. And I'll see you guys in the next video. or stream. Goodbye.